The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She was their only child. Rebecca attended New Milford High School, graduating in 2004. During her high school years, she was an active athlete. After high school, Rebecca enrolled in Northeastern University in Boston, where she pursued a degree in athletic training. This 5-year program focused on the care and prevention of athletic injuries. In her 4th year, Rebecca held leadership positions, including a spot on the Dean's Council and serving as president of the athletic training club. She played a key role in organizing the university's vision for the Future Athletic Training Leadership Forum and was also involved with the Episcopal Lutheran Center. Rebecca was known for her friendly and approachable nature. She had a large circle of friends and was always willing to lend a helping hand. At 6:30 a.m. on May 20, 2008, Boston police received a call from the manager of the Parker Hill apartment complex. The man was in a panic. He told the police that he had seen a door ajar in a 3rd-floor apartment. A 22-year-old student, Rebecca Payne, lived in the apartment. When he knocked on the door and called her name, no one answered him, and he decided to go inside. There, he immediately saw dark red spots and stripes on the floor that led him to one of the rooms. He found Rebecca lying on the floor with no signs of life and her belongings scattered. When police arrived at the crime scene, they observed that the front door showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her attacker and may have let herself in willingly. Her 3rd-floor apartment had 2 bedrooms, and Rebecca's body was found face down on the floor in the bedroom. A trail of blood led from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting that the attack occurred in the living room, as there were traces of shell casings in that room. Forensic examinations showed that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. Blood stains in the apartment suggested that she had been conscious for some time, attempting to crawl to the bedroom before losing strength. Her valuables were still there. The state of disarray in her apartment was suspicious, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have deliberately created the mess to distract them. Additionally, the mess may have been caused by Rebecca's struggle for life. When they searched the apartment, police observed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Signs in the 2nd bedroom suggested that someone else had been living there. Identifying this person became a top priority for the police, as they were likely Rebecca's killer. After speaking with the apartment manager, police discovered that Rebecca lived with another student in her apartment, prompting police to begin searching for the student. At the same time, police interviewed residents of Parker Hill Apartments, some of whom reported hearing a woman scream in gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m. Unfortunately, no one reported the incident to the police. Rebecca Payne's tragic death left her parents reeling, not only from the loss of their daughter, but also from the appalling indifference of their neighbors. Despite hearing Rebecca's screams and gunshots, no one called for help. Rebecca's parents described her as a vibrant and compassionate young woman. She had a big heart and was known for putting others before herself, always looking to help those in need. In the aftermath of her death, police interviewed residents of the apartment complex where Rebecca lived. One man, who lived on the 1st floor, reported seeing a black SUV approach the building at night. However, due to the darkness, he was unable to see the car's license plates or identify who got out of the vehicle. The apartment building where the crime took place had both internal and external surveillance cameras. However, when police asked the building manager for the footage, they discovered that the cameras only allowed for real-time viewing. The outdated equipment required a video cassette to be inserted into a VCR and manually recorded, but no one had done so. Given this information, along with the fact that the manager was the one who found Rebecca's body, police began to suspect him of the crime. As a resident of the building, he had constant access to Rebecca's apartment and was aware that the surveillance cameras were not being monitored. The suspicion against the manager grew when a background check revealed his past run-ins with the law, specifically related to prohibited substances. Furthermore, an officer noticed dark red stains on the front door of the manager's apartment, which were swabbed and sent for examination. The manager was taken to the police station for questioning, where he denied any involvement in Rebecca's death, claiming he spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife. The police also spoke with his wife to verify his alibi. The woman's husband was initially a suspect, but his wife provided an alibi for his whereabouts during the night of the crime. Laboratory results showed that the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, leading the police to release him due to lack of evidence. Police investigating the case reviewed video and photo materials from the scene and focused on a public transportation card found near the crime scene. This card, used to pay for public transport in the Boston area, stores data on its usage, including the location and time of each use. Traffic police provided police with surveillance camera footage of the card being used. After reviewing the recordings, police determined that the card belonged to Rebecca and was used by her on the night she went missing. The footage showed Rebecca walking home, appearing calm and alone, with no signs of anyone following her. Unfortunately, this discovery did not lead to any new leads on the identity of the offender. The police obtained another video from a surveillance camera located outside the hospital building, near the Parker Hill apartments. This video captured a black SUV driving by at the time of Rebecca's attack. Although the video was poor quality, preventing the officers from seeing the license plates, it did appear to match the description given by the witness. And the detectives police it was a Ford vehicle. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Rebecca's roommate at the police station. The roommate expressed shock at Rebecca's death and stated that she had been living with her parents while studying for an exam. This alibi was verified by her parents, clearing her of suspicion. However, the conversation was still fruitful as she provided potentially valuable information that could aid the investigation. According to Rebecca's roommate, Matt, Rebecca's boyfriend, had access to their apartment. To determine if Matt had a motive to harm Rebecca, police reached out to him by phone. Matt explained that he had moved to New York State to live with his parents around the time of the attack. He claimed to be depressed over Rebecca's death. Matt stated that he had been staying with his parents, and they confirmed his alibi. Police obtained a record of Matt's cell phone activity, revealing a conversation with Rebecca on the night of the attack, around midnight, a few hours before her death. However, the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. To verify Matt's alibi, police conducted an experiment and concluded that it would have been impossible for him to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours, making it unlikely that he committed the crime. As a result, Matt was ruled out as a suspect. Rebecca's family and friends traveled to her home state of Connecticut to say goodbye, but the police investigation into Rebecca's death stalled. Despite their efforts, no new evidence was found, no witnesses came forward, and no DNA samples were collected. The case appeared to have reached a dead end. Years went by. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred. Anthony White was arrested by the Boston police for trafficking illegal substances and faced a lengthy prison sentence. In an attempt to reduce his sentence, Anthony offered to provide police with information about the night Rebecca Payne died. Recognizing this as a potential opportunity to solve the long-standing case, the police accepted Anthony's offer. Anthony declared that on May 20, 2008, Anthony received a call from Cornell Smith, an acquaintance involved in the same illicit activities as him. Cornell requested a meeting and Anthony agreed. Cornell arrived with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who drove a black SUV. The three of them went to the Parker Hill apartments, where Michael parked in a spot with a clear view of the building. When Cornell spotted Rebecca in a third-floor window, he identified her. They waited until the lights in her apartment went out, assuming she had fallen asleep. Cornell then climbed from the first-floor balcony to the third-floor balcony, where he found the door to the apartment open. However, upon entering, he found Rebecca awake and lying on the couch in the living room. She began screaming when she saw him, and a brief struggle ensued. Cornell shot her 5 times before fleeing the apartment through the front door and escaping with Anthony and Michael in the SUV. Police questioned the credibility of Anthony's testimony, suspecting that he had fabricated the story based on news reports in order to get a reduced sentence. Police did not understand Cornell's motives, as Rebecca had no connection to him. However, according to Anthony, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters who lived on the first floor of Parker Hill apartments looked very similar to Rebecca. The sisters were Cornell's rivals in the illegal drug trade. In retaliation, Cornell targeted Parker Hill Apartments, but he was not sure which floor or apartment the sisters lived in. When he saw Rebecca at the window, Cornell mistook her for one of his enemy sisters. Police looked into Cornell Smith's past and found that in February 2008, he was arrested for dealing illegal substances. Shortly before Rebecca's death, Cornell was released on bail. According to Anthony White's statement in 2012, Cornell wanted revenge against the sisters. However, when Anthony White came forward, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year sentence in prison for another conviction. With Anthony's new testimony, Cornell was then also charged in Rebecca's murder. Cornell denied his involvement, though. Before the case could go to trial, the key witness, Anthony White, died in prison. There was no longer any evidence to prove Cornell's involvement in the murder of Rebecca Payne. Since Anthony White was dead, the police needed new testimony from Michael Balba, who was with Anthony and Cornell on the night of the murder, in order to convict Cornell Smith. Michael was arrested and taken to the police station, but without evidence. He denied involvement and requested a lawyer. As a result, hopes of solving the case seemed lost. In a final attempt to find the connection between Cornell and Rebecca's death, the police looked into Cornell's case files in connection with a separate case of drug trafficking. During the search, the police came across letters written by Cornell Smith to the judge. These letters revealed Cornell's arrogant attitude towards others, some of which seemed meaningless. However, one letter contained a crucial piece of evidence that linked Cornell to Rebecca's death. It remains unclear why these letters had not been scrutinized earlier, despite being addressed to the judge. The discovery of this key evidence ultimately helped police build a case against Cornell. In a letter written out of anger, Cornell referenced an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, leading to the unfortunate death of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell. This letter confirmed that Cornell, was in Rebecca's apartment at the time of the incident. The trial took place in 2015. Jeffrey Karp, a defense attorney with more than 20 years of experience, was the first attorney to represent Cornell. However, Jeffrey withdrew from the case after an incident. Cornell suddenly stood up and struck Jeffrey Karp in the head with his handcuffed hand, causing chaos in the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. Jeffrey Karp then opted not to prosecute, instead allowing the judge to appoint a new attorney for Cornell. Cornell Smith took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to taking the life of Rebecca Payne as part of the deal. He received a prison sentence of 18 to 20 years from the judge. To honor Rebecca's memory, her hometown renamed the local tennis court after her. A garden and a National Athletic Trainers Association scholarship fund have also been established in her name. According to Rebecca's father, Nicholas Payne, these tributes were created with one main goal in mind: we don't want her to be forgotten. North Miami is a suburban city located in northeast Miami-Dade County, Florida, United States. It has a population of just over 60,000 people. During the 1950s and 1960s, North Miami had a notable presence of organized crime, including various mafia families operating in the area. The mafia, also known as La Cosa Nostra, established a significant influence on the city's underworld during this period. And it was during this era that the DeMaras were also flourishing in North Miami. Born in 1910, Joseph J. DeMaria grew up in Boston with his younger brothers, Dominic and Joseph. He and his brothers shared a close-knit bond which continued into their lives as adults. In 1928, the three brothers started a business selling fresh produce. They started with a push cart and later opened a store in Boston. Their sales grew and they moved to a bigger location in Quincy Market in 1930. By 1939, their business expanded nationally. The DeMaria brothers formed partnerships with tomato growers in different states like Florida, Texas, and California to meet the needs of supermarket chains. They were also the first in New England to import tomatoes directly from Cuba, ensuring a year-round supply for their customers. As their business thrived, the brothers decided to invest in farming. They started planting tomatoes in open packing operations in Florida and later in California. They expanded to other locations like South Carolina. In 1937, Joseph married Josephine, who was just 2 years younger than him. the early 1940s, Joseph, Josephine, and their 3 children, Joseph Jr., James, and Richard, moved from Boston to North Miami, where Joseph and his brothers had built their livelihood by selling fresh produce. Joseph DeMaria lived in Miami Beach before moving to Keystone Island in North Miami. In 1953, Joseph's only daughter Linda was born. Unfortunately, his beloved wife Josephine passed away from breast cancer soon after in 1956. 3 years later, in 1959, Joseph DeMaria married Frances, a woman 20 years younger than him. In the late 1950s, winter farming meant lighting kerosene lamps and placing them between rows of tomato plants to ward off the frost. Richard remembered his father waking them, and then leading them to the fields to ensure their crops didn't freeze. Joseph and his 3 sons would drive into farms and work on the tomato plants before they were sent off to processing. In March 1961, 21-year-old Richard traveled to Ohio to meet with his brothers and business partners to discuss the possibility of his Frances and Joseph getting a divorce and to update his 52-year-old father's will. His stepmother, Frances, was not living with them at the time. Joseph DeMaria ran various aspects of the business from Miami and frequently traveled across the United States and Latin America. In 1961, he and his new wife, Frances, lived in the Keystone Point home, along with Joseph's daughter, while his sons lived on the family's farm in Bradenton. But what was about to take place was something none of them could have ever expected. It was a cold winter night in Bradenton on March 24, 1961. And at 3 a.m. Richard and his 2 brothers were fast asleep on their father's farm, but at the same time the police received a frantic call from Frances DeMaria, who told them a horrifying tale. She said that she and Joseph had gone out for dinner from the Keystone Point home. Frances had taken the wheel of their Cadillac Fleetwood and Joseph sat next to her. As they left for dinner, they stopped at an intersection near the south exit of Keystone Point, just west of the broad causeway. Suddenly 2 men jumped into their car, causing chaos. One of the men forcefully held a gun to the back of Frances' head, making her drive to an empty lot in Sansuja States. Joseph turned to look and was violently struck in the face with the pistol. Frances screamed and also got hit. Frances was knocked unconscious when she was hit with the gun. When she woke up, she found Joseph dead in the seat beside her, and the murderers had fled. In a moment of panic, she raced through the brambles and bushes to a nearby Phillips 66 service station. It was from there that she called the police. Patrolman Ben Scola of the North Miami Police Department arrived at the scene as the first officer. He observed Frances at the gas station, noting that she didn't appear severely injured. There are scratches on her face and some specks of blood can be seen on her dress. The scratches seem self-inflicted, as if she ran her hands down her face. Frances informed him that she was knocked out or rendered unconscious and unable to witness the shooting. During the investigation, shell casings were discovered in the back seat of the Cadillac. Upon closer examination of photographs, it became apparent that there were at least 2 unspent rounds on the back seat as well. According to police records, Norman Logan, an employee of the gas station, stated that Frances never mentioned her husband being shot until the arrival of the police. 2 nearby fishermen claimed they didn't hear anything during the incident. Frances informed the police that the assailants took jewelry worth $5,000 from her and $400 in cash from her husband. However, despite the robbery, a gold ring and diamond cufflinks were still found on her husband's body. A day after the murder and robbery, according to the Miami Herald, it was reported that Frances said the gunman forcefully took her jewelry. Despite being ordered not to turn around, she disobeyed, and one of the bandits struck her with his pistol, causing her to lose consciousness. However, to the police earlier, she said that her husband had turned around. The article went on to say that upon regaining consciousness several minutes later, Frances discovered that the attackers had fled, and her husband was slumped against the car door, with blood flowing from his head. Overwhelmed with panic, she swiftly made her way through the brambles, bushes, and sharp rocks to a nearby Phillips 66 service station where she called the police for assistance. During a subsequent interview with the Miami Herald, conducted after the murder, Frances revealed that the assailants referred to her husband as Frank instead of Joe for some unknown reason. She speculated that they may have mistaken Joe for someone else. This information was also not given to the police when they had spoken to her about the murder. Other news reports from the time stated that Frances recounted how the gunman violently struck her with the pistol when she became hysterical as they attempted to take her jewelry. This caused her to lose consciousness, and upon waking up she discovered that her husband had been shot. The hysterical part here was again not mentioned to the police in the interview they had conducted with Frances. In another article published by the Herald, it was mentioned that Frances reached the gas station and informed Norman Logan, the owner's son, that the two men had entered the car, one in the back and one in the front. But when the police arrived at the gas station on the night of the murder, Norman had made it clear to them that Frances had not mentioned the murder until their arrival. There were many discrepancies in the way that Frances was explaining the shootout in the murder scene. Was this because she was under pressure from someone? While all this was happening, Joseph's brothers weren't in the picture at all. Were they hiding something? The passing of Joseph meant that the DeMaria business would only be divided between the two remaining brothers, a motive the police looked at closely at the time. Frances wasn't done yet, though. She proceeded to provide an exclusive interview to the Herald, again in the same week, where she recounted the events again. This time she explained that as they approached the Causeway Baseshore intersection, two men suddenly entered the back seat of the car. A car was trailing behind, but there was no other traffic on the causeway. Frances was at the wheel, and one of the men held a pistol to the back of her head, telling her to follow their instructions precisely. They directed her to continue straight ahead towards San Souci Estates. After driving for approximately 1 block, they ordered her to make a right-hand turn off Bayshore Drive. Curiosity prompted her husband, Joe, to ask the men what they wanted. One of the assailants responded, stating their intention to obtain his money. They insisted that both Frances and Joe keep their heads facing forward, but Joe repeatedly turned back, attempting to resist them. On one occasion he turned and received a forceful blow to the face. He then turned to Frances, and she saw that he was bleeding. Shortly after he turned back again, and they struck him once more. In response, Frances began screaming. The attackers then hit her twice on the head. When she regained consciousness, she found herself lying on the gravel outside the car. The assailants had taken all her jewelry valued at approximately $5,000. Joe had around $400 in cash at the time, which she later discovered was also taken. Frances firmly believed that the men were not amateurs. Their composed and methodical demeanor left her convinced of their experience. Although she did not get a clear look at them, their manner of speaking did not align with that of hoodlums. Frances could not shake the thought a terrible mistake had been made, since the men referred to her husband as Frank instead of Joe for some inexplicable reason. She said that she believed that they had mistaken Joe for someone else, or perhaps their primary motive was simply robbery. She did not believe that they had any intention of causing harm. Now, in this interview, Frances logically covered all the points that did not match the statements she gave to the police in interviews she gave to newspapers. But why was she defending her statements? If she had a concussion from the blows she received on her head, it was obvious that she would not remember all the events precisely. But what was more interesting was that she was defending the assailants too, by saying that they might have mistaken Joseph for someone and their prime motive was only robbery and not murder. This led the police to theorize that the killer was maybe someone very close to Joseph and Frances. Since technology was not very evolved in those days, the police could not gather any DNA samples or even fingerprints that could help them identify the killers. There were no other clues because nobody saw the killers and they fled before Frances gained consciousness. So the case gradually went cold. But Richard, Joseph's son, remembered that there was some tensions between Frances and Joseph before Joseph got murdered. In fact, Richard had a meeting with the other family members to discuss his father's will, and also the divorce with Frances, and Frances was not living with Joseph at the time of the murder. She had left for Ohio. She had come back when she heard that Joseph had made changes to his will. His will now read that Frances would only receive part of the estate if she lived with Joseph throughout their marriage. On the day of Joseph's funeral, Richard remembered that Frances did not even shed a tear. She was as straight-faced as they come. She was more interested in doing her hair for the funeral than the funeral itself, and despite her saying that she was hit with the butt of the pistol on her forehead, There were no signs of a wound on her forehead at all. After the funeral, Frances ordered all of Joseph's children to move out within 24 hours, and Frances herself received $250,000 out of Joseph's will. And a few weeks after Joseph's funeral, Frances remarried another man. Surprisingly, this was the attorney who was going to represent Frances during her divorce proceedings. Almost 2 decades later, in the 1980s, Richard started looking into the case again with the help of an attorney and volunteer, Paul Novak. Novak was experienced with crimes happening in and around Miami. After much consideration, Novak advised Richard to send the case to a forensic scientist. Novak knew that there had been a lot of organized crime occurring in Miami in the 1960s, and there were many crimes linked to one another. So Novak and Richard thought that this might be a mafia hit, as Joseph was a successful businessman. In 1991, almost 30 years after Joseph's death, Richard DeMaria saw another perspective on the case. He reached out to John Thornton, a forensic science professor at the University of California, Berkeley, for a second opinion. After reviewing the case, Thornton wrote a letter to the Miami-Dade police expressing his doubts about Frances's statements. He found it unlikely that the situation she described matched the gunshot wounds, which seemed to have been fired from 2 different angles. Additionally, Thornton pointed out that the amount of blood discovered at the crime scene did not align with the amount of time Frances claimed the incident took, but the police could not consider it because there was no evidence. Another police officer at that time revealed that Frances could have been suspected during the initial investigation, but a high-ranking official had ordered the police to not conduct an investigation on Frances as she was widowed in grief and also a victim, and hence the police did not further investigate the Frances angle, nor did they question her again. Then, for decades later in the 2000s, some officers came to Richard with a list of suspects. The police department was looking into the older cases and Joseph's murder was one of these. These suspects were already on the list that Richard had made through his own investigations, but Frances was not on the list. In 2006, Frances DeMaria died. She was 82. She had married 4 times, including her marriage to Joseph DeMaria. Around 2019, almost 6 decades after Joseph DeMaria's murder and 2 decades after Frances' death, the homicide squad at the cold case squad of the Miami-Dade Police Department, along with Paul Novak, started turning the pages of the Joseph DeMaria cold case file again. In the old police reports, they found many clues regarding the investigation. First, after his father's murder, Richard had given some shell casings to the police. These shell casings came out of a .25 caliber SATA, an Italian auto pistol, a gun that Joseph owned but was with Frances all the time. Richard himself had fired some bullets with the gun into their house's swimming pool and had recovered the shell casings. But why did Richard give these casings to the police? Because these casings were similar to the shell casings found in the back seat of Joseph's car when he was murdered. There had been 2 empty rounds still lying there when the body was found. According to the police investigation, Joseph sustained 4 gunshot wounds. 2 bullets were fired from the front, directly into his mouth. The other 2 rounds were shot from the left side, hitting the area in front of and behind his left ear. These shots were fired from an extremely close distance, leaving traces of gunpowder around the wounds. This meant that Joseph had been killed by someone who was very close to him in terms of proximity. It also meant that the assailants weren't sitting in the back seat, as the wounds were on his mouth and around his left ear, making it clear that whoever shot him first from Joseph's left side and then also through his mouth to confirm that Joseph had died. In addition to the gunshot wounds, Joseph had 9 bruises or cuts on his head. He also had bruises on his left arm and right index finger, which meant that Joseph did struggle before he was shot or that he was dragged after he was shot. Blood was found inside the car. On both the front and the back seats, as well as on the car's exterior, the blood flowed down the window and seeped out from the bottom of the door. During a re-examination in late 2019, it was reaffirmed that no blood was discovered on the driver's seat, steering wheel, or driver's door. There was also no blood splatter found beyond the center of the front seat. This meant that whoever was sitting in the driver's seat, that is Frances, was not wounded at all. On the car's exterior, streaks of blood were observed moving backward. The amount of blood indicated the seriousness of the wounds and the time it took for the bleeding to occur after the gunshot. This meant that the vehicle was moving when Joseph was shot, and it kept moving when he was bleeding. This too was contrary to what Frances had said. She had said that she went unconscious while being in the driver's seat, so the car could not have kept moving after that. No blood was discovered in Joseph's lungs. However, slight redness was observed on his jaw. Medical experts suggested that these findings could suggest that someone had their arm around Joseph's neck when he was shot, blocking his airway. Alternatively, it could mean that the fatal shot caused an immediate stoppage of breathing. Joseph's gold ring and diamond cufflinks were still on him when he was discovered in the car, contradicting Frances's claim that it was a robbery. Two men who were fishing nearby did not hear any gunshots or any signs of a struggle or even a bullet being fired. Frances had no cuts on her feet, and her shoes were found near the car in a manner that suggested that they were deliberately placed, not scattered. When a female deputy replicated the path Frances claimed to have taken from the car to the gas station while barefoot, her feet were cut and bruised in multiple places. The initial person Frances spoke to at the gas station was Norman Logan, who reported that she never mentioned her husband being shot. But the biggest blows were yet to come. When the detectives along with Novak ran ballistic tests, they found that the trajectory of the bullets in the crime scene could only be fulfilled if the bullet was fired from the driver's end. It did not match the trajectory of the bullets mentioned by Frances in her original statements. Moreover, the shell casings that Richard gave to the police were confirmed to be the same as the shells of the bullets used to kill Joseph, meaning that Joseph was also killed by a .25 caliber SATA. The same gun had been missing from the DeMaria household on the day Joseph went out with Frances for the last time. But the most revealing thing about the case reports was that a trail of blood was found from Joseph's garage, leading to the spot where Joseph's Cadillac was parked. This clearly indicated that, in fact, Joseph had been shot in his garage when he was with Frances at home before they ever left for dinner. Now the detectives of the homicide squad along with Novak knew that Frances could only get Joseph's estate only if she was with him throughout their marriage. And that's what happened. Frances was with Joseph until Joseph's death, and hence she got the $250,000. The police concluded that the divorce angle and Joseph's will was reason enough for Frances to kill Joseph and get the money from him. This, along with all the obvious clues, was reason enough for the police to conclude that there was just one person who would do all this, and that was Frances DeMaria. On May 10, 2023, almost 3 years after the Joseph DeMaria cold case was reopened, the Miami-Dade Homicide and Cold Case Squad held a press conference in that they announced that they had reason enough to believe that Frances DeMaria killed Joseph DeMaria. The motive for her killing was the impending divorce and Joseph changing the will. The way she did it was by shooting Joseph in their house's garage, then driving the car to another spot 3 or 4 miles ahead, then walking barefoot to the gas station and calling the police, while leaving Joseph's body in the car itself. The police also believed that the .25 caliber SATA gun was thrown by Frances below an underbridge, and hence the murder weapon was never found. After this announcement, Richard, who is 82 now, said that he was relieved, but he was not happy at all. He knew his stepmother was the killer. Richard also revealed that in 1961, he had told the police to investigate Frances and she was the killer, and the police had refused to do so. Frances passing away in 2006 meant there was no way for her to answer for her crime. She had lived a full life without ever being held accountable for her actions. Novak said that this case was just a prime example of how politics can overshadow justice. The high-ranking official who ordered the police to leave Frances alone still remains unknown. The DeMaria company since has grown a lot, spreading internationally. On their websites, they mentioned that the DeMaria companies continue to uphold the values of hard work, integrity, and excellence established by the brothers. They believe that their determination and perseverance live on through future generations of the DeMaria family and their dedicated employees. Richard was also influenced by these values and continued to seek justice for his father. And despite the fact that his stepmother will never see justice, he can have some peace in knowing that she did it. Why do you think Frances was not looked at more closely during the initial investigations? The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda lived with her family in New Chapel Hill, about 100 miles from Dallas. It's a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people. She grew up to be a bright and ambitious young woman, graduating with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. Amanda is an employee of Trinity Mother Frances and a student at Tyler Junior College. Majoring in English literature, she was an aspiring writer, a lover of words, music, and life. But on September 15, 2010, Amanda's family had to face frightening events. Amanda's lifeless body was discovered at her family's home in New Chapel Hill. She was found by her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson. Nate had just returned home from a jog in the woods. He called 911 and explained the situation to the police. Nate said he went out for a run because he was stressed about homework. When he came back, he found the door to the house open, which was very unusual. He first checked his room, then Amanda's room, and that's when he saw his sister lying on the floor, unresponsive. The police asked Nate to clarify which door was open, and he explained that people usually entered the house through the garage door. Nate was very emotional, and the police tried to calm him down. When asked if he touched anything in the house, Nate replied that he did not. During the 911 call, Nate told the police that he had discovered the body of his sister Amanda. When asked if Amanda had been shot, Nate replied that she had multiple bullet holes in her head. When the police arrived on the scene, Nate told the same story. Further investigation by a criminologist revealed that Amanda had been sitting up in bed when she was shot. Then she fell to the floor. Notably, there was no sign of a gun or shell casing at the crime scene, suggesting that the perpetrator may have taken the weapon with him when he left, or may have used a revolver, which does not fire a shell casing. Amanda's parents were devastated and could not understand what had led to this tragic event. Being deeply religious people, they found it difficult to understand who could be capable of such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was a kind person who did not want to harm others and had no enemies. Police began canvassing the neighborhood where the crime occurred to gather more information about Amanda and her family. In interviews, a nearby resident said that Amanda Anderson's family was happy and very religious. A neighbor offered a possible explanation for Amanda's death. He said that the area was generally quiet and low crime, but that about 2 weeks before Amanda died, a nearby home had been robbed. It was possible that the perpetrator of that robbery was also involved in Amanda's death. Perhaps the perpetrator saw Nate Anderson out for a run, broke into the home, and then shot Amanda when she discovered them. To explore this theory, police needed to find evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. When the police asked the family to check for any missing valuables, Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. Although there were valuables such as jewelry and a laptop in Amanda's room, nothing was missing. Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. This surprising discovery made the police question the motive behind the crime. If the intention of the criminals was to steal, why did they shoot Amanda multiple times after seeing her? The lack of stolen items proved that this was not a robbery. The police began to look into other motives. The forensic team searched the entire house, not just Amanda's room, for evidence. They collected fingerprints and hair, hoping to find samples left by someone outside the household. Additional evidence was collected from Nate, the person who first discovered Amanda's body. His clothing was taken to be examined for potential connections to the crime scene. Initially, Nate's clothing did not appear to be important to the police investigation because it did not contain any visible blood. However, as part of standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects, police sent Nate's clothing to a lab for further analysis, along with other collected evidence. Meanwhile, the police asked Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, to reveal the location of all the firearms in the house. As it turned out, the Andersons possessed an extensive collection of guns, which was not unusual for a family in Texas. They didn't actively hunt, but occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark's lead, the police discovered weapons and seized more than 10 different types of pistols and rifles, as well as several revolvers. Their informants also did not provide any clues, leaving the police without a clear lead. The police did not have many clues to identify the culprit. On September 17, 2010, the police obtained the autopsy results 2 days after Amanda's death. The report revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, all in the head. What's striking is that any one of these shots would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator fired 3 additional times. The bullet wounds locations on Amanda's head were also peculiar. The shots were fired from a small caliber pistol. 2 wounds were located on the top of her head, one near the right temple and the last one on her forehead. Except for the shot to the right temple, which was fired at a 90-degree angle, all shots were directed from top to bottom. The nature of these wounds suggests that Amanda's death was more like an execution. The crime scene revealed that .22 caliber bullets were used in the shooting. The lack of gunpowder marks around Amanda's head wounds suggested the shooter was at least a yard away. Based on forensic evidence, police concluded that Amanda knew her killer. 2 key factors led to this conclusion. Amanda was sitting on her bed, working on her laptop when she was shot, and the shooter was standing beside her. It's likely that if a stranger had entered her room, Amanda would have reacted defensively. However, she took no action, indicating she was familiar with the shooter and didn't perceive them as a threat. The police sought to identify the killer among Amanda's acquaintances by questioning her friends at college. Her best friend revealed that Amanda was cautious and didn't engage with strangers or use unknown substances. Amanda was not involved in any illegal activities. She also had no enemies at college. However, it is possible that someone was secretly following Amanda and planning an attack. In an attempt to find leads, police spoke with college security about any suspicious incidents related to Amanda or other students over the past year. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. A week after Amanda's death, police have found no leads and have not identified any suspects. Amanda's family grieves, and they are desperate for answers about what happened. In an effort to gather more information, a reward was offered to anyone who could provide helpful leads to the investigation. The goal was to encourage someone with valuable information to come forward. The police station soon received numerous calls with tips, but most of them were unsubstantiated assumptions that only hindered the investigation. Despite the time-consuming process of verifying each lead, none of them yielded the desired outcome. Ultimately, every tip led to a dead end. The police decided to re-question the Amanda family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of her wounds suggested a personal motive. Amanda's mother was baffled by the crime, describing her daughter as a devout churchgoer and excellent student who was kind to everyone. She revealed that Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, but had been dating a friend her age for about a year. However, the relationship had ended, and as far as her mother knew, they had not seen each other since. Police were looking for Amanda's ex-boyfriend to investigate the nature of their relationship and determine whether he had any ulterior motive for harming her. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported that he and Amanda attended some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never dated. They spent time together on a few occasions. However, their interactions were normal. When asked about his last encounter with Amanda, he said that he saw her the day before she died. According to him, she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This information was not valuable. Therefore, the police decided to review the case from the beginning. The police started with Nate's 911 call. During the conversation, Nate mentioned that he did not go into his sister's room and said that someone had shot Amanda. When asked if Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound, Nate replied that there was more than one wound, specifically mentioning multiple shots to her head. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they did not immediately find evidence of multiple gunshot wounds, despite their experience in such cases. Furthermore, no gun casings or bullet casings were found at the scene. This raised questions about how Nate knew his sister had been shot multiple times. Investigators concluded that it was impossible for anyone standing at the door to know that Amanda had been shot in the head, let alone the exact number of times. The police returned to Amanda's house and inspected the door that Nate said had been propped open when he arrived. Although they found some scratches, the lock showed no signs of damage. This suggested that the scene may have been staged. After the crime lab examined the weapons seized from the home, The officers believed that a .22 caliber handgun may have been used to shoot Amanda. Analyzing all the available information, the officers came to a shocking conclusion. It appeared that Amanda had died at the hands of a family member. The pistol had been hidden in a safe place, and the killer knew where it was. Furthermore, the person who shot Amanda later returned the gun to its original location. Amanda's parents were not home on the night of the murder. Her father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. Only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother, Nate, were home. Therefore, all the initial evidence pointed to Nate as the prime suspect. However, the police did not understand the motive behind the crime, especially why Nate used their father's gun to harm his sister. To gain a better understanding of the events, the police took a closer look at what happened that evening. According to Mark Anderson, he had called his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received the call from Nate, who was crying and claimed that someone had shot him. What the police found surprising was that Nate had called his father before dialing 911. The police needed concrete evidence before they could file any charges. Their goal was to avoid causing further heartache to Amanda and Nate's parents. The police decided to speak with Mark Anderson without directly accusing their son. However, Nate's parents soon realized that the police suspected their son. In an effort to gather more information, the police asked Mark if Nate had recently used a .22 caliber pistol. Mark revealed that he had given the pistol to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, after which Nate had used it in the backyard for shooting practice. A subsequent search of Amanda's home led the police to the discovery of several .22 caliber shell casings in the backyard. While these casings matched the bullets found in Amanda's body, it was still possible that this was just a coincidence. More evidence was needed to establish a definitive connection. However, 2 weeks after Amanda's death, Nate's clothes, which he had been wearing when he found his sister dead, were sent to a lab for testing with luminol. The chemical reaction showed traces of blood on his clothes. A blood spatter expert concluded that Nate Anderson had either been in the room when the shooting occurred or that he had fired the fatal shots. Tests confirmed that Nate's clothes had his sister's blood on them. This raised many questions, as Nate and Amanda were known to be close and affectionate siblings. Their parents described their relationship as loving, and family photos showed the siblings getting along well. On November 10, 2010, police got a warrant for Nate Anderson. They found him in the church and arrested him for murder. Everyone familiar with the case was shocked. No one could believe that Nate would do such a thing. The trial began on October 24, 2011. It was a long and emotional road for many, especially Amanda's family. Despite the evidence against the young teen, family members vowed to stand by Nate. Nate's grandmother said that Nate knew nothing but church, school, and love, and that Nate would never hurt his sister for any reason in the world. Amanda's parents struggled to accept that their son was responsible for Amanda's death. Nate was tried as an adult. An examiner for Nate said it would be best for him to remain in juvenile court, but the judge disagreed. For the first time, the state revealed some of the evidence police found in Amanda's home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors claimed that Nate's computer showed a history of repeated visits to adult websites and drawings of violent scenes. Additionally, one of the text messages on Amanda's phone said Nate should be shot. Her friend asked for what. She replied, for putting big staples in Amanda's head and never helping around the house. Nate Anderson eventually pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime in February 2012 as part of a plea deal. Prior to his guilty plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and then to his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. According to a statement released by the parents, Nate told them that he shot Amanda with a handgun found in their home. Mark Anderson, Nate's father, stated that Nate begged for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, Nate's mother, expressed the pain she faced, was a loving mother to both of her children. As a result of the plea agreement, Nate was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believed that entering into a plea agreement was in Nate's best interests, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Great Falls is a city located in Montana known for its scenic beauty and vibrant community. The city is named after the series of waterfalls on the Missouri River, known as the Great Falls of the Missouri. The city offers a mix of natural beauty and urban amenities, with attractions like Giant Springs State Park and River's Edge Trail. And it is here that today's story takes place. But first, let's start from the very beginning. Dwayne Bogle was born on January 18, 1937 in Waco, Texas. His parents, James George Bogle Jr. and Albuquerque Walker, welcomed him with open arms. Dwayne was a high school graduate from Waco and was adored by his family for his charming personality and great sense of humor. As fate would have it, Dwayne's journey took him to the U.S. Air Force in 1955. Fresh-faced and full of ambition, was likely his first assignment after completing basic training and technical school. He was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. For 8 months, he served as an airman second class near the charming town of Great Falls. Little did he know that during his time there, he would meet the love of his life. Patricia Kalitsky was born on August 20, 1939 in the small town of Great Falls. She was a junior at Great Falls High School, and her classmates thought she was funny, caring, and full of energy. She always had a big smile on her face. Patricia seemed to be talented in everything she attempted, including ballet and tap dancing. In December 1955, 16-year-old Patricia crossed paths with 18-year-old Dwayne. They both shared a passion for dancing and singing. And as fate would have it, Dwayne fell head over heels for Patricia while stationed at Malmstrom. Their connection was instant, and despite knowing each other for only a few weeks, they couldn't bear to be apart and dreamt of a future together. Patricia's family welcomed Dwayne with open arms, and during Christmas of 1955, he even stayed at their home, becoming a part of their festivities. On that eventful day, January 2, 1956, Dwayne and Patricia embarked on a journey to Wadsworth Park full of joy and anticipation. They said goodbye to their families, burning with excitement for their very first trip together as a couple. Little did they know that this adventure would soon take an unforeseen turn, altering the course of their lives forever. They had planned to be back home by 9 p.m., but as the hours ticked away, Patricia's parents grew increasingly concerned. Patricia, known for her responsible and punctual nature, had failed to return by her usual 10 p.m. curfew. Frantic with worry, Patricia's parents reached out to her older sister, hoping for any clue of her whereabouts. But Patricia was nowhere to be found. They scoured the familiar places where Patricia liked to spend her time, yet she remained elusive. As their search grew more desperate, a troubling possibility crept into their minds. Could Patricia have followed in her sister's footsteps and eloped with Dwayne, having already experienced the pain of betrayal from their elder daughter? As years back she too eloped with her lover, they reluctantly believed the notion that history might be repeating itself. Fearing the worst but burdened by their past heartbreak, they hesitated to involve the police, unsure if Patricia had willingly vanished or if something more sinister had occurred. On a cold January 3, 1956, 3 adventurous boys went for a hike near Wadsworth Park in northwest Great Falls, Montana. As they walked along a dusty path, they came across a strange and unsettling sight. There was a car, parked between 2 trees, still running with the radio playing loudly. The headlights were still on, and the emergency brake was on. It seemed like the driver had vanished just moments before. Fueled by curiosity, the boys cautiously approached the vehicle. To their shock, they discovered a lifeless man lying face down, partially trapped under the vehicle. They noticed that his hands had been tightly bound behind his back, using what looked like his own belt. The boys immediately alerted the authorities, who wasted no time in rushing to the scene to investigate. They carefully scoured the entire area, being careful not to disturb any potential evidence. During their examination of the body, they found a gunshot wound to the back of the man's head. Surprisingly, there were no other signs of injury on his body. This suggested that the killer's only motive was to end his life swiftly, without prolonging his suffering. As the police searched the car, they stumbled upon a crucial piece of identification, a driver's license belonging to an 8-year-old man named Dwayne Bogle, which provided a vital lead in the case. The police minds raced with theories, one of which was robbery. The car's engine was still running, indicating a swift getaway by the killer after snatching valuables. But then they had a terrifying suspicion. They believed that something more sinister than just robbery had occurred. At that time, kidnappings were occurring frequently, which raised concerns that Dwayne might have been deliberately chosen as a target. It appeared that the perpetrator's original plan had gone terribly wrong, resulting in the tragic decision to end Dwayne's life. The police were determined to find any clue, so they carefully searched every corner of the area. However, the predator had managed to cover his tracks completely, leaving no evidence behind. The police then contacted Dwayne's family and shared the devastating news of his murder. When Dwayne's parents received the shocking information, they were overwhelmed with disbelief and sorrow. They couldn't comprehend how someone could harm their beloved son, who was always full of joy and loved by everyone. It was an incredibly heart-wrenching moment for them. Upon hearing the news, Patricia's worried parents stepped forward and shared crucial information with the police. They revealed that Patricia was also with Dwayne and hadn't returned home either. Concerned for her safety, they expressed their fear that if Dwayne had been killed, then where was Patricia? The police were puzzled because during their initial investigation at the crime scene, there were no signs of Patricia nearby. Determined to find her, they returned to the scene and intensified their search. It was on the following day, January 4th, 1956, that Patricia's lifeless body was discovered by a road worker along Vineyard Road, 5 miles outside of Great Falls. The grim location was nearly 8 miles away from where Dwayne's body had been found. It was evident that Patricia had likely been kidnapped. Tragically, a trail of blood leading down the rocky ravine indicated that her body had rolled to the spot from the gravel road above. Like Dwayne, she had also suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Little did the authorities know, this was just the beginning of a twisted and chilling mystery. The police decided to investigate the sequence of events and gather information about Patricia and Dwayne's last known movements. They discovered that the couple had been seen together at Pete's Drive-In restaurant, enjoying a drink on the evening of January 2nd, 1956. According to the restaurant staff, they arrived at 8:30 p.m. and left shortly after 9:00. They were alone in the car during their visit. The location where Dwayne and his car were found was known as a popular spot for couples, leading the police to believe that Patricia and Dwayne had driven there willingly. It seemed that their killer had come across them at that spot and forced them out of the vehicle. Authorities firmly believed that Dwayne and Patricia had fallen victim to the same perpetrator, given the striking similarities in their deaths. The unsettling circumstances pointed to a chilling execution-style killing where both victims were forced to kneel before being fatally shot in the back of the head. As the investigation progressed, a chilling detail emerged. Patricia's body, discovered at the bottom of a rocky ravine, was fully clothed except for a single missing shoe that was never found, which had slipped off as she rolled down the embankment. The initial examination of her body also provided no conclusive evidence of assault. However, as the investigation deepened, a surprising twist emerged. The results of further testing and examination painted a completely different picture. The revelation came when injuries consistent with assault were discovered on Patricia's body, contradicting the initial assessment. They were also able to take a swab from her that they hoped would help identify the killer. Unfortunately, the technological limitations of the time prevented any conclusive findings. However, all the testing reports and evidence were carefully preserved for future breakthroughs that could unravel the mystery. The coroner's assessment added another layer of intrigue. It was believed that Dwayne had actually clung to life for several hours after being shot. The shooting itself was estimated to have taken place sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight, and Dwayne's tragic demise occurred between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Authorities were dedicated to identifying the killer, and they launched a massive investigation. Sheriff DJ Leeper from the Great Falls Sheriff's Office went the extra mile by using his own money to buy a polygraph machine that could potentially unlock vital clues. They called in an expert from Seattle to ensure its proper use. A team of 10 officers devoted themselves to the case. Working day and night, the search began for anyone with the potential motive to harm either Dwayne or Patricia as the net of suspicion widened. Patricia's mother, Catherine, shared a concerning conversation she had with Dwayne the day before his lifeless body was found on January 2nd, 1956. Dwayne seemed troubled and Catherine, being a caring mother, asked him what was bothering him. Dwayne revealed he had been upset about a recent argument he had with a friend from Texas. This piece of information piqued the authorities' interest, as they wondered if this friend could be connected to Patricia and Dwayne's murder. Somehow they tracked down the friend and questioned him for 4 hours. Eventually, the police had to release him when they couldn't find any evidence linking him to the murders. Moreover, he was proven to be in his Texas home at the time of the murder. Frustratingly, the police couldn't find a clear personal motive behind the murders of Dwayne and Patricia. This roadblock narrowed their investigation options, so they shifted their focus to the people who had been out drinking on the night of the murders and also tried to identify the individuals who kept guns with them. Just when things seemed bleak, 2 witnesses emerged with a surprising piece of information. On January 10, 1956, they informed the police about a man not only possessed a gun, but was also seen returning to his house around midnight clutching the weapon in his hand. This information sparked a glimmer of hope that they might have finally caught a break in the case, but their hope quickly faded. When they confronted the person and spoke with him, he vehemently denied leaving his house that night and claimed to not even own a gun. The police's suspicions were nearly enough to arrest him based on the testimony of the 2 men. However, in a shocking turn of events, the witnesses eventually confessed after hours of intense questioning. It turned out that they had been lying all along. Driven by their deep hatred for the man, they saw this ongoing investigation as an opportunity to fulfill their desire for revenge. This revelation left the police stunned and frustrated, realizing that they were back to square one in their search for the true culprit. After 2 months in March 1956, Sheriff Leeper had to end the full-time inquiry into the case without identifying the killer. The lack of progress was disheartening for the sheriff, who expressed his frustration and regret for not catching the person responsible for the deaths of Patricia and Dwayne. The investigation continued, but after a year, on the 1-year anniversary of the murders in January 1957, the sheriff spoke to the Great Falls Tribune. He shared his determination to keep going, saying, "I guess it's just one of those things, but we're not giving up. Maybe this year we'll catch them. He must have made a mistake. They all do. Someday we'll find out what it was, and then we'll have them." The deaths of Dwayne and Patricia had a deep impact on their families and the communities they belonged to. Patricia's father, Henry, became emotionally numb and found it incredibly difficult to acknowledge Patricia's death. Patricia's sister, Darlene, shared in an interview with the television show Hard Copy that their father, Henry, couldn't bring himself to talk about Patricia or cope with the loss. In order to find solace, Darlene chose to cherish the happy memories she had with her sister. Despite the pain, both families knew that nothing could bring Patricia and Dwayne back. The loss was so difficult to comprehend, and finding closure seemed like a distant possibility. Patricia's mother, Catherine, shared that she and Dwayne's mother exchanged letters for years after the murder. Their correspondence served as a way for the 2 families to connect, united by the tragedy and grief they experienced. All the while, the case had been cold. In 2001, Detective Phil Madison joined the investigation into Dwayne and Patricia's murder with a fresh approach. He discovered a swab taken from Patricia's autopsy that had been stored as evidence for over 45 years. With advancements in DNA technology, the swab was sent to the Montana State Police Crime Lab for analysis. Shockingly, the lab found a cell in the swab that did not belong to Dwayne, confirming that Patricia had been assaulted. Authorities spent the next few years comparing the DNA from the cell to more than 35 suspects previously identified. However, none of the suspects' DNA matched the one found on the swab. The investigators also checked the DNA found on the swab against national criminal databases, but no match was found. They looked into suspects such as James Whitey Bulger, a notorious mobster from Boston, who had lived in the Great Falls area during the time of the murders. Bulger had a previous arrest for assaulting a 15-year-old girl in 1951. Another potential suspect was Edward Wayne, a convicted serial killer who had murdered 2 couples years after Dwayne and Patricia's death. The police thought he might have been in the Great Falls area during that time, but he denied any involvement. Both Bulger and Wayne were ruled out as suspects when their DNA did not match the DNA found on the swab. The investigation went on for another 18 years until a breakthrough emerged. Inspired by the technique used in solving the Golden State Killer case in 2018, Detective Sergeant John Cadnaran, who was assigned to the case of Patricia and Dwayne's murder, had a strong determination to take the investigation forward. He teamed up with forensic scientists to gather more DNA evidence from the swab taken during Patricia's autopsy. In 2019, they adopted a cutting-edge method called genetic genealogy. Using biotechnology, this innovative technique allowed forensic genealogists to compare the DNA profile found at the crime scene with profiles in public genealogical databases. By analyzing the shared DNA, they were able to uncover distant relatives and construct a family tree. It was like solving a puzzle, connecting the dots between different individuals and their genetic ties. With the meticulous construction of the family tree, the investigators were on the verge of unmasking the suspect. However, there was a chilling twist in the story. The prime suspect had already passed away and his remains had been cremated, making it impossible to obtain a direct DNA sample from him. Undeterred, they turned their attention to the suspect's children, who resided near Great Falls, and requested their DNA for comparison. To their surprise, the DNA from the children confirmed that their father was the source of the cell found during Patricia's autopsy. It was a devastating realization for the children to discover that their beloved father was responsible for the death of two people. On June 8, 2021, the Cascade County Sheriff's Office officially announced the identity of the perpetrator in Patricia and Dwayne's murder as Kenneth Gould, who also lived in Great Falls. After thorough investigation and confirmation through DNA analysis, the authorities strongly believed that Kenneth Gould was the one responsible for the murders of Patricia and Dwayne. However, since Gould had already passed away, he could not face a trial or be officially named as the killer. Instead, they could only label him as the most likely suspect in the case. This groundbreaking announcement came more than 65 years after Patricia and Dwayne's tragic deaths, marking it as the oldest case in the world ever solved using the innovative technique of genetic genealogy. Kenneth Gould, a local horse trainer, had spent his early years in Great Falls, Montana. He got married in 1952 when he was 24 years old to 16-year-old Lulabelle Brown and started a family raising 5 children. Surprisingly, he lived just a short distance from Patricia's house and was frequently seen riding horses in the area at the time of the murder. Despite his proximity to the crime scene, Huld's name never appeared in the police files and there was no apparent connection between him and Dwayne or Patricia. Curiously, a month after the murders in February 1956, Huld sold his family property and embarked on a series of moves across Montana, eventually settling in Missouri in 1967. From that point on, he never returned to Montana. Gould's journey came to an end in 2001 when he passed away in Oregon County, Missouri at the age of 79. His life remained intertwined with the mystery of Patricia and Dwayne's murders, leaving unanswered questions about his possible involvement and the reason behind the murders. Speaking about the case, Detective Sergeant John Cadnaran from the Cascade County Sheriff's Office mentioned that people can have secrets they never tell anyone. Because a lot of time had passed between the murders and Gould being identified, many of Patricia and Dwayne's loved ones had already passed away and couldn't hear the news. Patricia's only surviving sister Darlene had advanced dementia when Gould was finally identified. The resolution of the case evoked various emotions within Dwayne and Patricia's family. Although they were relieved to finally have answers, Gould's identification brought back memories and reopened old emotional wounds among the relatives. Dwayne's niece, Karen Bogle McCarthy, expressed her thoughts to the New York Times, saying that the use of modern technology in solving the case was beneficial for her generation. Karen was the daughter of Dwayne's younger brother, James Jim Bogle, who had always looked up to Dwayne while growing up. Unfortunately, Jim didn't live long enough to witness the identification of his beloved brother's killer, as he passed away in November 2013 due to a neurodegenerative disease. Patricia and Dwayne's surviving family felt a great sense of relief, as they no longer had to deal with the wild speculations and strange theories surrounding the case. One theory that deeply upset Dwayne's family was the belief that he had become involved with the mob in Great Falls, leading to their tragic deaths. There are also rumors suggesting Dwayne's involvement with drug dealers in Texas. However, Gould's identification not only revealed the truth about who took Dwayne away from his family, but it also put an end to decades of speculation and rumors. While closure has been found, the emotional wounds remain for the families affected by this tragedy. The case of Cassie Farington. Cassie was born on December 22, 1990, in Virginia. She was the second of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. Cassie excelled academically and was an active student, she becoming a member of the National Honor Society and participating in sports. Her initial goal was to pursue a career in medicine. However, when Cassie turned 16, her life drastically changed. She became pregnant, which led her to change her future goals and plans. Several major changes in Cassie's life occurred in the next month. Cassie graduated from high school, gave birth to a baby, married Bradley Farington, and moved out of her parents' house, all within a brief period, just 1 month. Several years later, she had another child. But over time, her family relationship began to deteriorate. Ultimately, the marriage ended in divorce. Despite this, she persevered, raising her 2 young children in Silver City, a small town with a population of about 10,000. At 22 years old, she worked as a nurse at the local hospital and rented a place from a coworker. As she turned 23, Cassie entered into a new relationship with a man named David Barry. He bonded quickly with her children, and she felt grateful for the way things were going good. Rather than rushing into things, they focused on building a life as a family unit. Cassie confided in her loved ones and coworkers that David had brought happiness to both her and her children, and she was hopeful that this new relationship would bring her the peace and happiness she had been missing after her previous failed marriage. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at the Silver City Hospital. They chatted for a few minutes, during which she shared her plan to drive home, pick up her children, and take them to school. Afterward, she intended to return home and rest for a couple of hours before picking her children up from school later that day. School staff called Cassie's parents when they couldn't reach her. Her children had finished their classes, but Cassie hadn't shown up to pick them up. Cassie's mother tried calling her, but there was no answer. Thinking Cassie might have overslept after a night shift, her mother asked Cheryl, her landlord, to check if Cassie was home and if she was okay. Cheryl went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. She then walked around the house and peered through the back door window, noticing water pouring from the bathroom into the kitchen. She knocked harder on the door and shouted Cassie's name, but still got no response. With her own key, unlocked the door and entered the house. The sound of running water was louder and more distinct. As she walked across the wet floor towards the bathroom, Cheryl called out Cassie's name, her voice shaking slightly. Then she saw Cassie. Cheryl, a coworker and friend of Cassie's, discovered her lifeless body in the overflowing bathtub. She was lying face down, wearing a house robe, as water continued to pour out. Despite Cheryl's first aid skills, she realized that Cassie had been dead for a few hours, as rigor mortis had already set in. This made CPR impossible. Cheryl immediately called 911 to report the incident. She then broke the devastating news to Cassie's parents over the phone, informing them of their daughter's passing. As Cheryl waited for the paramedics and police to arrive, she took a moment to inspect the house. She noticed that the second bathroom, located elsewhere in the house, also had an open faucet with running water. However, the hub there had an overflow protection, so the excess water wasn't running onto the floor but going down the drain. Cheryl also observed that the towel rack in the bathroom had been pulled off the wall and was lying on the floor. Upon receiving the news, Chuck and Darlene, Cassie's parents, were devastated. They stopped everything they were doing and traveled from Arizona to Silver City. Within a few hours, they arrived at the house where their daughter's body had been found. The police were already on the scene, investigating the circumstances surrounding Cassie's death. The officers observed that there was no sign of forced entry into the house, as all the locks were still in place, the windows were closed, and the glass was intact. Additionally, valuables in the house were still intact, so the possibility of robbery was unlikely. The local sheriff questioned Chuck and Darlene, asking if Cassie had any intention of committing suicide and if she had any reason for doing so. However, Chuck and Darlene firmly dismissed this idea and declared that there was no way Cassie would do such a thing. The police chief repeatedly told Cassie's parents that she had likely taken her own life, as if he was trying to convince them of that fact. However, Cassie's parents found the police investigation to be rushed and confusing. Normally, the scene of the case is thoroughly examined and investigated, a process that can take several days. In Cassie's case, the police left the scene just a few hours after her body was found, and they informed Cheryl that she was allowed to enter and use the house. This worries Cassie's parents, and they decide to investigate the house themselves. After finding water still in the bathtub, they emptied it and discovered black streaks on the sides of the tub that resembled the marks left by rubber-soled shoes. They also found Cassie's glasses, hairband, and a coat hanger in various places on the floor. Cassie's parents were even more suspicious when the police didn't take the time to search the house for fingerprints. They suspected that the authorities might be trying to close the case quickly without thoroughly investigating it. It wasn't until they contacted the district attorney's office that the police appeared to put in more effort. However, they were still unable to close the case due to the findings of the medical examiner. The autopsy report showed that Cassie had several bruises on her body, particularly around her neck. The examiner concluded that her death was a homicide. However, the investigation had difficulty by the property owner having cleaned up and made some repairs after the incident. This meant that the original crime scene had been disturbed, which could impact the investigation's progress. Cassie's parents were met with silence from the police as the months went by. The police did investigate David Barry, a man Cassie had been seen before her death, but he was quickly ruled out as a suspect due to a solid alibi. However, as time passed, Cassie's parents grew increasingly frustrated with the local police, feeling they were not doing enough to solve the case. Their concerns led Chuck and Darlene to request a meeting with the chief district attorney to voice their dissatisfaction with the handling of the investigation, specifically with Detective Jose Sanchez. After reviewing the case file, the district attorney agreed with the parents, finding that Jose had made numerous errors. As a result, Jose was removed from the case and a more experienced detective took over. From the start, Cassie's family and friends suspected her ex-husband, Bradley Farington, was responsible for her death. At the time of Cassie's passing, Cassie and Bradley was entangled in a heated custody battle over their children, and Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death because he will win custody of the child. Bradley Farington is a former Silver City police officer who had just retired a few months before Cassie's death, and his good relationship with investigators kept him from being considered a suspect. However, Bradley had a clear motive for the crime and possessed the necessary knowledge to destroy evidence. He was well aware of police procedures and how to cover his tracks. For example, the bath water will wash away any remaining DNA evidence on the body, as well as erase shoe prints on the floor. Given Cassie's familiarity with Bradley, it's likely that she would have opened the door for him. Unfortunately, due to the poor handling of the investigation by the local police, so any evidence linking Bradley and to the crime scene was lost and could not be restored. The only remaining way to hold Bradley accountable is through eyewitness testimony. Cassie had told her parents about their family being abused by Bradley and that he often acted arrogant because he was a police officer. Cassie lived in constant fear, and Bradley's friends were police officers and she couldn't turn to them for help. She had confided in coworkers about Bradley's threats, including the ominous threat that he would make her disappear without a trace. Tragically, her life was cut short and she was found dead on March 24, 2014. 19 months later, on October 23, 2015, 28-year-old Bradley Farington was arrested in connection with Cassie's death. Although Bradley was a suspect, the local police mishandled evidence, leaving none that directly linked him to the crime. As a result, the judge made a decision permitting previously recorded statements from Cassie to be used as testimony during the trial. During the trial, multiple witnesses testified, including Cassie's parents, friends, and coworkers, to whom she had confided about the abuse she endured at the hands of Bradley. Notable among the witnesses was Dr. Michael Hunter, a renowned forensic expert from San Francisco. With over 20 years of experience, Michael presented the jury with autopsy photographs and concluded that Cassie likely died from strangulation. Cassie had injuries to her neck, which supported that conclusion. After a warrant was issued for Bradley's arrest, Jose Sanchez, who initially handled the case, appeared in court. Jose claimed he had never considered Bradley Farington a suspect because there was no reason to, and also testified that no fingerprints of Bradley were found at Cassie's home. The crime scene was unusually clean, Jose said. He believed the scene was cleaned after the crime was committed, which explains why no fingerprints were found. After 4.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Bradley Farington guilty on September 7th. In 2018, Bradley was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He later filed an appeal with the New Mexico Supreme Court in 2020. Bradley appealed his conviction, claiming the trial court erred in allowing Cassie's coworkers, friends, and family members to testify in court. However, the state's highest court declared it had enough evidence to convict Bradley and rejected his appeal. Children from across the UK are waiting for their final term at school to wind down and for the summer holidays to begin. After getting dressed, having her breakfast, and telling her family goodbye, a 15-year-old girl sets off to school at around 7:55 a.m. Her parents receive a call. It's their daughter's school, and she hasn't turned up. She hasn't taken her phone charger. She hasn't taken a change of clothes, and she doesn't have any money with her. Danielle Jones has seemingly vanished. On the 16th of October, 1985, Danielle Sarah Jones is born to parents Tony and Linda in Essex, England. She lived with her parents and two younger brothers. According to her mother, as a toddler, Danielle was very happy and lovely to have around, but not very confident. As she got older, Danielle was a homely child with a great sense of humor, but still very shy. Despite her lack of self-confidence, she did have a big group of friends. One of her biggest passions were animals, and she adored her two young rabbits. One member of the family that Danielle had grown close to was her uncle. Tony's sister was married to a man called Stuart Campbell from Grays, Essex. The father of two worked as a builder, and when Danielle and her brothers were small, their uncle would spend time with them and play with them, treating his nephews and niece exactly the same. Linda said that he was a bit of a charmer, but also full of himself. When talking about the relationship between him and her husband Tony, she said that although they got along, there was something about Stuart Campbell that Tony didn't like. When Stuart married Tony's sister, Danielle had served as a bridesmaid, and Stuart Campbell was now part of the family. Campbell's presence had caused tensions. Linda and Tony had become frustrated with his constant intrusion. As Danielle grew older, he had taken a particular interest in her. He would meet Danielle off the bus as she got in from school. He would stand outside his van, making sure that everybody knew he was there. Danielle was embarrassed by this and didn't like the extra attention it brought to her. He would come to the house 4 or 5 times a week, to the point that Linda and Tony were becoming fed up with it. On one occasion, Tony recalled Stuart sitting on the sofa next to Danielle. He was repeatedly asking his niece, "Why are you embarrassed, Danielle? Why are you going so red?" When Tony intervened and asked what the problem was, Campbell brushed it off and said that there was no problem at all. Danielle had apparently tried to disengage with his behavior, but Campbell resisted. This was an incredibly difficult situation for Linda and Tony. If they confronted Campbell about his behavior and were wrong, it could cause immeasurable damage in the family. Also, all they had were seemingly isolated incidents that Campbell could explain away as innocent misunderstandings. On the morning she had gone missing, Danielle's brother was watching from the window. He saw her turn left as she went out of the gate, which was her normal route to school. Seconds later, he watched as she turned around and began walking the other way. She was also seen by 2 schoolboys who assumed that she could have been heading to a nearby shop, but she could have also caught the bus to school heading in that direction too. When the call came from Danielle's school, Linda was horrified. She knew their daughter was not a rule breaker and would never have bunked off. Her father said that even in the unlikely event that she had skipped school, she would certainly be home as soon as the sun started to go down. Danielle was afraid of the dark and would never have stayed out late. Her friends and family continued to text and call her. Danielle never answered. This was completely out of character for Danielle. She would often leave her mother notes telling her where she was going, if it was next door or to a friend's house, and she would always call when she got there. As family and friends went out and trawled the estate for her, Linda didn't leave the house or lock the door in case Danielle contacted them or came home. Tony went round to his sister's house. He couldn't get a response, but upon looking through the window, Tony saw camera equipment set up in the living room, which he found bizarre. It also seemed strange that everyone was out looking for Danielle, except Stuart Campbell. Linda said Tony was agitated when he arrived home, frustrated with his brother-in-law that he wasn't searching for her. It wasn't just her family who were incredibly concerned. Detective Superintendent Peter Coltman of Essex Police explained that Danielle's school friends were deeply worried and were actively seeking the help of police to also try and find her. Linda stayed awake most of the night, hoping that her daughter would walk back through the front door. As night fell, Danielle still hadn't come home. The police arrived at the house with sniffer dogs and went through the estate. They established the route that she had taken. They ascertained that she had walked and then retraced her steps. Her mother said that she was in shock and continuing to cling to the hope that her daughter was still alive and going to come home. In the 3 days that followed, were made of the family home, but nothing of relevance was found. The search soon expanded and every house in the village of East Tilbury was visited by the police. The residents were spoken to and asked to check their sheds and outbuildings to ensure that she wasn't hiding. The response from the public was huge. Linda said the support from the community was absolutely outstanding. For weeks today since Danielle went missing, tasking today for Teams 2 and 3 will be a footpath that runs from Butts Lane to a railway bridge at Linford in Essex. The drivers will be continuing today at the lake nearest to the East Hilby village. There's tire tracks, marks on one ear of that lake where they'll be paying particular attention. As the hours ticked by and with still nothing from Danielle, hope began to fade and the police were becoming increasingly convinced that something awful had happened to her. They referred the case up to the major investigation team. DC Ed Mayo was assigned to be the family liaison officer, whose job it is to support the family through the case and provide them with updates as and when the police get them. Family liaison officers provide that vital link between the family and the investigating team. As the investigation escalated, it was vital for Ed to build a rapport with the family and understand their dynamics. This would help determine what kind of girl Danielle was and how the family unit worked. Her parents raised their concerns with the police about her relationship with Stuart. Now that she had gone missing, they were concerned about what that relationship actually was. Danielle had now been missing for 3 days and suspicion was on one person, Stuart Campbell. Initial inquiries by Grays Police and then confirmed by the major investigation team centered around a blue van. A witness has seen the driver of a blue van talking to Danielle. There was also a sighting of a girl matching Danielle's description, having an altercation with a man in a blue van. Danielle's uncle, Stuart Campbell, owned a blue van. Once this information came to light, it confirmed the worst fears of officers. She had most likely been abducted. The press conference was quickly set up and the media interest in the story continued to grow. When someone goes missing, the press is vital in circulating names, photographs, and descriptions, hopefully generating new leads for the police. As the interest in Stuart Campbell continued to mount, the police dug into his background. What they found was horrifying. He had forcibly detained a 14-year-old girl in his house and taken indecent photographs of her. He entered a plea of guilty for this offense. Having served a year on remand, he was freed at the end of the trial. Whilst Linda and Tony knew that he had had a run-in with the law, when they asked questions, they were told it was nothing and all a big mistake. Linda would later say that she and Tony had been led to believe that he had been acquitted. Further investigations by the police found 30 victims over a 20-year period. His modus operandi was always the same. He would pose as a glamour photographer and hand out business cards with his details on them. He would lure unsuspecting victims back to his house and proceed to take indecent pictures of them under the guise that they were going to be glamour shots. Following his arrest for detaining the 14-year-old, He was able to manipulate the family into thinking that he was the innocent victim in a big misunderstanding. Policemen are so concerned about Campbell, they either needed to eliminate him or find evidence that implicated him. He was placed under surveillance, but his behavior only exaggerated their concerns. He didn't seem to be a concerned uncle whose niece was missing. He spent time driving to car parks, taking photographs of silver cars, which matched the description of his own Nissan Primera. It appeared he was trying to build an alibi for himself. Following the surveillance that lasted for several hours, the police had to make a decision. It was important for the investigating team to weigh up all the possibilities. It was vital that they didn't risk Danielle's life if she was still alive and being held captive by Campbell, but also that they didn't risk the possibility of him leading them to her. 5 days after she was last seen, at around midnight, Stuart Campbell was placed under arrest. As Danielle had moved into her teenage years, her relationship with her father could occasionally be strained, with Linda saying it appeared to be nothing more than what can happen with teenage girls and their fathers. Campbell spoke of this during his interview, saying that prior to Danielle going missing, the family was at their breaking point. Campbell's alibi was that he had been at a DIY shop in Raleigh. He hadn't purchased anything, which the investigating team found strange. He said that he was returning home but was delayed, and that he had telephoned his wife to inform her of this. He said that after getting home, he went to his neighbor's house to do some decking. Following these interviews and despite his refusal to cooperate, the police did not have enough to hold him in custody any longer. He was released on bail pending further inquiries. Detective Superintendent Peter Coltman said that the prospect of releasing Campbell worried him as he believed he was a highly dangerous offender. The police needed evidence. Everything was checked and then checked again. During a search of Danielle's room, a pencil case was found. Inside it were 2 notes, the first of which read, "Hi Princess, hope you have a lovely holiday. Text me when you get back. Love, Stuart. Kiss." The second one read, "Hi Princess, in case you missed my last note, I just thought I'd pop in another to let you know that I do miss your smile. Kiss kiss." In the weeks before Danielle had gone missing, she had gone on holiday with her family. While they were away, Campbell had gone into Danielle's bedroom and left her the notes. She didn't talk about this with her mother, but she did confide in a friend. Her friend was incredibly concerned, wondering how he had got into the house and why he had crossed that line with his niece. Campbell had previously done some work on the house and fitted the new back door. While the police were never able to find the keys, they believed that he did have a key to that house. Simultaneous searches were also carried out on Stuart Campbell's family home, a semi-detached house on Meadow Road. The police found a plethora of photography equipment, alongside indecent images that he had taken of young girls. They also found he had indecent images of children which he had downloaded off the internet. When the search moved up into the loft, a bag was found hidden. The bag contained many disturbing items, including lingerie and handcuffs. Police believe that when Campbell got a young girl to his house, he would use the contents of this bag and take indecent photographs of his victims. Also in the bag, police found a pair of white stockings. While perhaps innocuous at first glance, when seen in the context of the rest of the items that had been found, these were a vital piece of evidence. On the stockings was a small amount of blood. The stockings were sent away to be tested. When the results of the testing carried out on the white stockings came back, it contained a mixture of Campbell's and Danielle's DNA. As part of their search, his vehicle was removed. A blue van. Detective Chief Superintendent Steve Reynolds told the BBC that Campbell had developed a relationship with Danielle that was certainly inappropriate and probably unlawful. The police could not reveal that they suspected Stuart Campbell of murdering his niece. They could only reveal an offender's name once they had been charged. The response from the public was enormous. People turned out in droves to help conduct searches of the Thames near to Danielle's home. It was described as having an eerie silence and a steely determination to find Danielle, and people would search for her for as long as it took. Danielle's family continued to hold on to the hope that she could still be alive, but as the police extended their search to deep water and abandoned buildings, their hope began to fade. Stupid Campbell was keen to show officers a text message that he had received. It was from his niece's phone. It read, "Hi Stu, what you up to? I'm in so much trouble." Police also discovered that on the day she had disappeared, a text had been sent from her phone to Campbell. It read, "Hi Stu, thanks for being so nice. You're the best uncle ever. Tell Mom I'm so sorry. Love you loads. Dan, kiss, kiss, kiss." It appeared that Danielle was still alive. While this had renewed her parents' hope, they were incredibly upset that she still hadn't made direct contact with them or come home. This hope was short-lived, however. When piecing the bits of the puzzle together, from the evidence found in his home to his history with young girls, this text message was an incredibly sinister development. In light of this, the major investigation team drafted in several experts, including a telephone expert. This cemented the police's belief that Campbell had lied about being in the DIY store in Raleigh. Cell site analysis was conducted regarding the phone call he had allegedly made to his wife. It concluded the call had not been made in Raleigh, but rather in the East Tilbury, Corringham area. Police also brought in a forensic linguist to analyze the language used in the two text messages, compared to the ones they knew had been sent by Danielle before she went missing. One thing that immediately stood out was the spelling of the word "what." The text message to Campbell showed it as WOT. Danielle never spelled it like this. She spelled it correctly when texting. Analysis showed that both his phone and Danielle's phone had been within the range of the same single phone mast when that text message was sent to him. Investigations also revealed that his phone and Danielle's phone were together near his home for around 30 hours after she vanished. In a bid to generate new leads and any new information, her devastated family appealed to the press. The case would soon be picked up by the BBC show Crime Watch, and 4 weeks after she had gone missing, an episode about Danielle would air. Her parents were interviewed as part of this episode. Her father said he did not believe that she would have run away. Linda begged for anyone with information to talk to the police. She said she understood that it was scary to come forward, but that it was necessary for them to find their daughter. Stuart Campbell had to answer his bail. Detective Chief Superintendent Steve Reynolds of the major investigation team said that based on the indecent images of the girls that had been found in his home, he was arrested and charged with these offenses, and he was taken to Harlow Police Station to be questioned by detectives. In the background, police continued to build their case against Campbell for Danielle's murder. Campbell's brother Alex visited him shortly after his arrest. He said, "The police asked me, could you go and talk to him? Then come back and just tell us your gut feeling. Tell us what you think." I went to see him, and within 10 minutes I knew he was lying. And there's never been any shadow of doubt in my mind since that moment. As the police continued to update Danielle's family, they were devastated that the man they thought they knew, they really didn't know at all. Linda would later say that one of Campbell's tactics was to drive wedges between fathers and daughters, just like in his previous interview, when he insinuated that the family home was not a happy one. His manipulation was further brought to light when it emerged that he would speak to Danielle and tell her he wouldn't put up with her family if he was her. He would then go and talk to her parents, saying that he had spoke with Danielle and things would get easier, thus playing Linda and Tony off against their daughter, all while maintaining a facade of trying to be helpful. Campbell also kept a diary that police would later refer to as the Danielle Diary. Any contact he had with her, whether it was a call or a text message, he would record. It was obvious that he was becoming not only more obsessed with her, but increasingly dangerous. There was one instance that also highlighted his incredibly manipulative ways. He had taken Danielle shopping and then out to the cinema. She mentioned to her friend that during this trip, Campbell had held her hand. Her friend's father was concerned by this. He would later say in a documentary, "I don't think at that stage it was for me to take the matter up with Lynn and Tony because I didn't want to upset Lynn and Tony's relationship with Tony's family. It could have been construed as me interfering, and I didn't think at that point in time that was the right thing to do." Campbell played on the fact that Danielle was growing up and used that to flatter her and draw her into his lies. The CPS decided that although Danielle's body hadn't been found, the police had enough evidence to charge Stuart Campbell with kidnap and murder. Following this, he would be on remand for the next 11 months. Despite Campbell being charged with her murder, police had more than 800 sightings from throughout the UK and Europe purporting to be Danielle. This provided a massive logistical problem for Essex police. Every sighting had to be investigated and eliminated. If there was even the slightest chance that she was alive and that particular sighting had not been investigated, it would be easy for the defense to raise that during the trial and raise a shadow of doubt that Danielle was still alive, meaning the case of murder could not be proven. Before the trial, and with one of their sons being called as a witness, Linda and Tony took both their boys to the court to familiarize them with the surroundings and help them prepare for the proceedings that were to follow. Linda said that Danielle's brothers were both devastated and hugely affected by her disappearance. She said that one was very matter-of-fact and the other was deeply angry. It wasn't just the impending trial that caused the Jones family unimaginable stress. Tony was self-employed and had to return to work at his dry cleaning business. However, Linda had given up her part-time cleaning job. Linda explained in a documentary that Stuart's link to Tony's side of the family had caused tension between them, saying, she explained that Tony was understanding and knew that she was simply venting her anger about the situation. She spoke about how even simple tasks like washing and ironing clothes was now incredibly difficult for her as she had no clothes of Danielle's to do. In a documentary that followed the family in the year after Danielle's disappearance, Tony explained that there had been a falling out with his parents and sister too. It's gone too far now to get back together. In the months leading up to the trial, the search effort was increased to try and find her body. Not only was this about finding vital evidence that could help complete the puzzle, this was about giving her family the peace of mind they desperately needed and deserved. They needed to be able to lay her to rest and have their questions answered. 12 days before the trial, a body was found in Hampshire. The police quickly cordoned off the area and conducted inquiries to try and ascertain who it was. As the family, press, and public waited for news, the results came in. Millie Dowler was a schoolgirl who had been murdered by serial killer Levi Belfield. He would not face justice for her murder for under the 10 years. Hers was a case that would spark national outrage and inquiry into phone hacking, and would bring one of the United Kingdom's biggest newspapers to its knees. Tragically for the Jones family, they were now back at square one. It was time for the family to hold a pretrial press conference. Facing the media was a mammoth task for the family. It was now time for the trial of Stuart Campbell, the man who had married into their family, the man they had trusted, the man who had put on a front of being a loving uncle, stood accused of the kidnap and murder of Danielle Jones. It was scheduled to last for 8 weeks at Chelmsford Crown Court. A journalist described Campbell as having an air of confidence about him, seemingly unfazed by the magnitude of the charges leveled against him. As they still had not found a body, the case of the prosecution was circumstantial, and they would need to convince a jury that Danielle had been murdered. The prosecution's case was that, unbeknownst to Tony and Linda, Stuart Campbell had been grooming Danielle, launching a campaign of manipulation, obsessing over her and driving a wedge between her and her parents. This was the first time her parents had seen him since Danielle's disappearance. Despite the rage and pain they felt, Linda and Tony sat in the courtroom and came face to face with the man who had ripped their family apart. The prosecution's case was reliant on several pieces of evidence. On the morning she was last seen, she had been seen talking to a man in a blue van, similar to the one owned by Campbell. She had gone missing without being in contact with her parents. The blood-stained stockings that contained DNA matching both Campbell and Danielle. His diary revealing his obsession with teenage girls and containing testimonies that he had manipulated young girls into posing for topless photographs. Another key piece of evidence were the text messages that Campbell claimed Danielle had sent to him. These did not match the patterns usually seen in messages sent by Danielle. Her messages were sent in lowercase as opposed to these messages sent in all caps. Forensic authorship analysis indicated that Campbell was the author, and that this had been done in an attempt to prove that Danielle was still alive. Records from the mobile switching center revealed Campbell's false alibi. His claim that he had been in Raleigh 30 minutes away at a DIY store could not be backed up by the mobile phone records. Analysis showed that both his phone and Danielle's phone had been within the range of the same single phone mast when the messages were sent. Investigations also revealed that his phone and Danielle's phone were together near his home for around 30 hours after she had vanished. Whilst Campbell was quiet throughout the trial, he was often passing notes to his legal team if he was not happy with one of the witnesses, showcasing his need to be in control of what was being asked to each witness. After an 11-week trial, the jury had reached their verdict. Stuart Campbell was found guilty by a majority of the abduction and murder of Danielle Jones. He was sentenced to life in prison for her murder. This was to run concurrently with his 10-year sentence for abduction. Later, the High Court would rule that he must serve at least 20 years before he can be considered for parole. The police were due to speak with him on Christmas Eve, but Campbell refused. Following his conviction in 2004, Campbell was granted leave to appeal. His lawyers argued that the trial judge, Mr. Justice McKinnon, should have excluded highly prejudicial evidence to the effect that Campbell had a fixation for young girls and taking photographs of them and had downloaded material about teenage girls from the internet. They also urged Lord Justice Kennedy, Mr. Justice Simon, and Mr. Justice Bean to rule that as one of the jurors lived next door but one to a police officer involved in the case, and that a senior investigating officer lived in the same village, they should have been discharged from the jury. In 2005, this appeal was dismissed by the Court of Appeal. The verdict of the inquest into Danielle's death was returned. It was ruled as an unlawful killing. Police interviewed Campbell in custody, and he refused to cooperate or tell officers where Danielle was. Following the case of Danielle Jones, the use of text message evidence also had wide-reaching impact. The University of Leicester had a group of researchers to begin studying the various text messaging styles under the hypothesis that forensic research into authorship analysis might prove helpful in future criminal cases. It was announced that Essex and Kent police had started searching a garage block in Thurrock after receiving new information. It was later announced that following the search, no discovery had been made. In 2019, Linda backed the Campaign for Helen's Law, named after murder victim Helen McCourt, making killers ineligible for parole if they do not tell police where they've hidden the body of a victim. This followed the tireless campaign of Marie McCourt, Helen's mother. Helen was a 22-year-old insurance clerk who was murdered in 1988. Her murderer Ian Sims has never revealed her body's location. The petition calling for Helen's Law had more than 600,000 signatures and high-level government support. In November 2020, Helen's Law received royal assent. Under the law, killers could still be released if no longer deemed a risk to the public, even if they refuse to disclose information, but the parole board will legally be required to consider whether they have cooperated with inquiries as part of their assessment. Justice Secretary and Law Chancellor, the Right Honorable Robert Buckland, QCMP said, "Denying families a chance to lay their loved ones to rest is a cruelty beyond words, compounding their grief further. Helen's Law makes it absolutely clear that murderers and evil sexual offenders, who refuse to disclose information about their victims, should expect to face longer behind bars." Thanks to the tireless effort of Marie McCaughton and other campaigners, more families should get the answers and closure they deserve. In 2021, Campbell's brother Alex Sharkey published a book entitled My Brother the Killer, detailing his life with his brother and the events after Danielle's disappearance. On the 20th anniversary of Danielle's disappearance, Essex police held an event to remember her. The case of the Raman family. This is the shocking case of the Raman family. Jean-Claude Romand was born on February 11, 1954 in Le Rive, France, was raised in Clairvaux, Jura. He attended La Lycée de L'Hans-le-Saunier until he completed his baccalaureate in 1971. He started classes at Université de Lyon 1, but left after one term, later joining medical school. He would later marry a woman named Florence Cray. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956. She studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. It was there that she met Jean-Claude Romand, who was a distant cousin of the family. Initially, Jean-Claude did not capture Florence's interest, and they barely knew each other, not spending much time together. However, over time, through their mutual friends and study sessions, they started spending more time together. Jean-Claude Romand was immediately infatuated with Florence and made persistent efforts to win her over. She, on the other hand, saw him as an ordinary guy, not particularly attractive to her or well-spoken. Florence had envisioned marrying a typical doctor, intelligent, attractive, and charming. Following a failed second-year exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy, together with Romand and Luc Ladmoral, who passed their exams. For the next decade, they maintained a routine of studying, taking exams, and supporting each other until graduation in 1980. Florence and Jean-Claude Roman got married, and 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline's birth, their son Antoine was born. Florence lived the life of a conventional wife and mother, working at local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. Florence was going about her daily routine in Ferney-Voltaire, France, a few days after Christmas in 1992. With her children, Caroline and Antoine, at school, and her husband Jean-Claude at work in Geneva, it was a normal day, filled with thoughts of their recent Christmas celebrations. While out, she ran into the school president, who had been wanting to talk to her about something since before the holidays. As they exchanged pleasantries and discussed their Christmas experiences, their conversation slowly turned to an unexpected topic, an intriguing incident involving her husband. The headmaster informed Florence about the headmaster's demotion due to an affair with a teacher, which had led to a school board meeting. Florence recalled the incident, but she was uncertain about the headmaster's intentions. The president revealed his plan to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, who was also a member of the school board. The president's secretary tried to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory where he worked, but his name was not listed. Florence found this odd and somewhat amusing, and she promised to ask her husband about it when he returned from work. After their exchange, they never spoke again. Jean-Claude Roman maintained a high level of privacy regarding his professional life, sharing only limited information with his family and friends. Florence believed that her husband was involved in important research and was well respected in the medical field. Roman drew a clear distinction between his work and personal life, to the point that Florence did not have access to his office phone number, as he wanted to remain undisturbed during work hours. If Florence needed to communicate with him urgently, she had to page him, and he would promptly return her call when he was available. Friends often asked Jean-Claude's role at The Who when speaking with Florence. They would inquire about what exactly Jean-Claude did at The Who. Florence would try to divert the question with a chuckle, admitting that she too was unsure. Occasionally, she would jokingly speculate that one day she might find out her husband was a secret agent. During the Christmas season of 1992, Florence found out about an annual Christmas tree decorating event organized by The Who. Her husband had never told her about this event, which made her feel uneasy. From the school president mentioning her husband's absence in the Who directory, to discovering the unmentioned family event, his workplace after many years of service, these incidents stayed on Florence's mind. It is uncertain how much these revelations troubled her internally, and whether she ever confronted her husband about them. Florence's brother, who was visiting for the holidays, noticed that she seemed deeply saddened during that time. Unfortunately, we can only imagine what conversations took place within the household during this period. As the days went by, the year 1993 began. Just a few days into the new year, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman went shopping together, with Florence encouraging Roman to buy a new suit. Later that same day, after leaving his wife, Roman visited a pharmacy and placed an order that would be ready by January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, Roman withdrew a total of 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. He then gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met before going to a gun store. When he left the store, he had tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. The night of January 10th to 11th was uneventful, but at 4 a.m. on January 11th, a frantic call was made to the fire brigade to report a house fire. Garbage collectors who were out on their early morning rounds stumbled upon the burning house and quickly alerted the fire brigade, who rushed to the scene. As the firefighters battled the blaze, they noticed movement in the upstairs bedroom window, suggesting that someone was inside and needed help. Medical personnel was summoned to the scene, and they rescued Jean-Claude Roman from the residence. When he was extracted from the house, Roman appeared to be in shock and was unresponsive, requiring immediate attention from paramedics. He was subsequently taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. Within a short time, the fire was put out, allowing the first responders to enter the building. Their family friend, Dr. Luc Ladmiral, was called to the scene, where he watched in horror as stretchers carried out the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence. Whenever a household fire results in fatalities, police launch an inquiry to uncover the circumstances surrounding the incident. This process aims to offer closure to the bereaved families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Therefore, following the tragic fire at the Rahman residence, law enforcement authorities initiated an investigation. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team made a disconcerting observation: evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull. This revelation sparked suspicion and intrigue, particularly after determining that Florence's demise resulted from blunt force trauma rather than the fire itself. During the examination of the children, another distressing revelation emerged. Contrary to initial assumptions, both Caroline and Antoine did not perish in the fire. Instead, they met their demise from gunshot wounds hours prior to the inferno. This stark reality indicated that the events unfolded before the household was consumed by flames. Subsequently, law enforcement commenced an inquiry into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, with Jean-Claude Romand incapacitated in a coma, rendering him unable to provide any information, investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing alternative leads. They transformed the Romand residence into a crime scene and reached out to relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors in a bid to unravel the mysteries surrounding the family. Luc Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being removed from the scene, was contacted as part of the investigation. Uncertain about the unfolding events, he struggled to comprehend the situation when questioned by investigators about potential enemies of the family. Luc couldn't identify any. Nevertheless, he was summoned for an interview several days later. Luc found himself facing police officers who probed into the family's relationships and recent events that could have triggered the fire. Despite thorough questioning, the consensus remained unchanged. The family had enjoyed a positive reputation, and no significant incidents had preceded the tragedy. Subsequently, the focus shifted to Jean-Claude Raymond, revealing a shocking revelation. Rahman had never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor had he delivered any lectures at the University of Dijon. In fact, he was not a qualified doctor at all, let alone being employed. Initially skeptical, Luc's disbelief gradually subsided as he recalled their shared academic journey, which gradually led him to a startling realization. He recounted to the authorities an incident from their second year, when he had noticed Jean-Claude Romand's absence during an exam. This departure from Romand's typical behavior had raised concerns for Luc. When Luc visited Rahman at his residence, he observed his friend's poor health, with clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude Rahman confided that he was battling lymphoma, a manageable form of cancer, which was exacerbated by exam-related stress. At Romand's request, Luc promised to keep this information confidential, particularly from Florence. Investigators concluded that Luc had no further relevant information. Consequently, they anticipated the forensic laboratory's findings on the incinerated residence, hoping to gain additional insights to aid their investigation. Investigators noted peculiarities within the residence. They discovered that all doors had been locked internally, indicating that no unauthorized individuals had entered the premises. Initially, an accidental fire was the primary hypothesis until the condition of the bodies was revealed. Subsequent findings hinted at a more sinister turn of events, prompting the urgent need to interview Jean-Claude during his coma-induced weeks. Law enforcement zeroed in on Jean-Claude Raymond as their prime suspect and initiated a thorough investigation. Although Raymond lacked a medical degree, his extended tenure at the university raised suspicions. The educational institution confirmed that Rahman had pursued studies for 12 years. While he successfully completed his first-year exams, he failed to pass those in the second year. Exploiting the absence of enrollment restrictions, Rahman continuously re-enrolled in the second year throughout his academic tenure. Despite years of academic dedication, attending lectures and studying medical books, Jean-Claude's failure who passed the second examination remained perplexing. The possibility of oversleeping and missing the exam session was considered a plausible explanation, and he had the opportunity to retake the exam months later, but he never showed up. As investigators examined the deaths of Florence and the children, they were confronted with another tragic discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, trying to convey the devastating news to his parents, arrived at their home only to be met with an unsettling silence. Upon entering, he found the lifeless bodies of his mother and father, both having suffered fatal gunshot wounds. A forensic analysis confirmed that Jean-Claude's parents were killed with the same weapon used to murder Antoine and Caroline. Furthermore, the close proximity of their estimated time of death indicated a deliberate connection. The unfolding events only grew more mysterious following the public disclosure of the tragedies. The police received an anonymous call from a woman unwilling to disclose her identity or any personal information, expressing reluctance to involve herself in the investigation. However, she did possess crucial information to share, revealing that she had engaged in a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude Romand after meeting him in Paris, and she too had been told that he was a researcher, the World Health Organization, and had misled her into believing he was a specialist with influential connections. The woman had been led to believe that Jean-Claude Romand was actively involved in and financing significant research projects. Moreover, he portrayed the banks in Geneva as highly advantageous, leveraging his supposed position. Romand enticed her with the opportunity to invest funds in a Swiss bank, offering an impressive 18% interest rate return. Through persuasive tactics, Romand managed to persuade his lover to make a financial investment. Initially hesitant, they reached an agreement wherein the woman would provide him with 990,000 francs for investment, with the expectation of receiving returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude Romand of their arrangement, emphasizing her need for the funds to sustain herself and her family. Following negotiations, they arranged to meet for a dinner gathering, with Romand extending an invitation to dine with a prominent political figure, sparking the woman's interest and eagerness to reclaim her investment. On the agreed day, Romand picks her up in Paris to embark on their anticipated journey. As night descended, Jean-Claude Romand and the woman found themselves still on the road, clearly lost. Suddenly, Romand pulled over and launched a surprise attack on the woman inside the car. He employed tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to incapacitate her. However, she fiercely fought for her life and managed to escape from the vehicle. Romand pursued her, but inexplicably halted when she pleaded for mercy. It seemed that he realized his plan had failed, and he begged for forgiveness. The excuse he provided to the woman was now familiar to the investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike his usual self, in a state of survival mode. The woman agreed to remain silent about the incident, in exchange for Jean-Claude safely returning her home. Investigators began to develop a grim perception of Jean-Claude Romand. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a scam artist. But the question that lingered in the detectives' minds now was he also a murderer? Upon awakening from his coma, Jean-Claude Romand was promptly approached by investigators, eager to engage in conversation. With suspicions lingering, they sought a confession from him. However, Romand chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, gazing into the distance with a vacant expression, refraining from speaking as inquiries swirled about the events of January 9th, the origins of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, and the severe injuries sustained by his wife. Jean-Claude faced a barrage of interrogative probes during multiple sessions. Despite the relentless questioning, he divulged nothing. It wasn't until the investigators told him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that a shift occurred. The tipping point that prompted him to finally break his silence remains unknown. But eventually he began to speak. On the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were spending a typical evening at home. After putting the children to bed, they retired to their own bedroom. According to Jean-Claude Romand, his memories of that night abruptly ceased until the chilling recollection of discovering his wife sprawled on their bed, surrounded by a pool of blood, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Uncertain of what transpired, whether an argument had ensued or not, Jean-Claude ran and proceeded to sleep beside his wife. He awoke the following morning to prepare breakfast for the children, Caroline and Antoine, who had gathered on the couch to watch a cartoon selected by their father. He served them each a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch television. When the children inquired about their mother's absence, he informed them that she was unwell and needed extra rest during that morning. Jean-Claude observed that Caroline felt warm, prompting concerns about her health. To prevent any potential illness from spreading, he instructed Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Somehow, Caroline ended up lying face down on the bed with a pillow over her head. Raman couldn't provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding this sequence of events, but speculated that it may have evolved from a game he played with his daughter. Subsequently, he retrieved his .22 caliber rifle fitted with a silencer and fatally shot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of her head. In a similar manner, Antoine met his tragic demise. His memories then became hazy. Subsequent evidence presented during the trial indicated that he left the house, purchased newspapers, and appeared to engage in routine activities, portraying a normal demeanor to any casual observer. Upon returning home, he watched television. Although Jean-Claude refuted these details during the trial, one fact remained certain. He received a phone call from his parents inviting him for lunch before noon on that fateful day, and he accepted the invitation. Departing from his eerily quiet residence, he drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. He then summoned his father upstairs under the guise of inspecting a purportedly malfunctioning boiler pipe. Despite his elderly father's physical limitations, he made an effort to examine the pipe at Jean-Claude's request, only to be callously shot in the back by his own son. Descending to where his mother was, he did not concoct any games or stories this time. His mother became the sole victim whom he shot while facing her. The motive behind this act remains a mystery. Before departing, he also shot the family's dog. When questioned about this during the trial, it was the only instance where he exhibited a semblance of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in sobs and tears, revealing that the dog had been cherished by his children, evoking memories of Caroline. It was at this moment that Jean-Claude Romand resolved to return home and take his own life. However, his plan did not unfold as intended. Recall the earlier mention of his mistress providing him with 990,000 francs for an alleged investment scheme. This was how Jean-Claude Romand sustained himself. He regaled numerous individuals, including his relatives and Florence's family, with tales of extravagant returns on investments. Due to their familiarity with Romand, they placed their full trust in him and they let him cook. Consequently, he amassed substantial sums of money from these trusting individuals over time. He would channel these funds into accounts under his own name in Geneva, thereby avoiding scrutiny from tax authorities, among others. Moreover, he meticulously managed the family's financial affairs, ensuring that Florence remained unaware of his deceitful activities. Eventually, the inevitable time to serve what he was cooking arrived. As expected, the people began demanding the return of their money, along with the promised profits. Regrettably, this was an obligation he could never fulfill. Every single franc he acquired was swiftly spent on his immediate needs, leaving him with virtually nothing saved, despite amassing over 2 million francs across the years. The inevitable moment arrived, when he would have to reveal the truth to Florence and all those who had entrusted him with their money. He found himself unable to sustain his web of lies any longer. The mounting pressure left him feeling trapped with no apparent escape. Like many other family annihilators, he convinced himself that by ending their lives, he would actually be sparing his family from the repercussions of his actions. Subsequently, he planned to take his own life, thus avoiding the harsh reality he faced. He believed he would be able to keep lying forever and had never anticipated being discovered or facing the need to confess. He would always just plan to fabricate another falsehood to sustain the charade. Throughout his life, on June 23, 1996, the trial commenced. He remained mostly silent, seated behind glass with a police officer on each side. He avoided making eye contact and kept his head down. By July 2nd, a verdict had been reached. Jean-Claude Romand was convicted of the murders of his wife, his children, and his parents. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 22 years. In 2019, he petitioned for release from prison to reside in a convent during his incarceration. He had reportedly become a devout Christian and had accepted his mistakes. He would spend the rest of his life repenting as a form of punishment. The judge granted his plea, citing his good conduct as a contributing factor. It is sad and unfortunate what all the victims endured at the hands of this liar, manipulator, and monstrous individual. As we reflect on this horrific tale, our hearts and minds are with the individuals whose lives were abruptly ended and the grieving families and friends they left behind. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.